maybe let's start by, if you can, introduce yourself again, your name, who you're working for, where you're working. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. My name is McDonald Francisco Mushaya. I'm from Malawi, working as a missionary church planter with the organization called OM, Operation Mobilization. Also, I'm a pastor with the Church of Evangelical Synod Church in Malawi. Sure.
And how has storytelling impacted what you're doing there in Malawi?
It's almost 5 years now, and I was trained as a trainer of the trainers in storytelling, using the storytelling in our DBS groups. And the storytelling, it has helped me a lot to share the same opportunity to the people whom we are reaching to, with the equal sharing and listen to the to the word of God, to the all people whom we are reaching to. So it has helped me a lot. And the other thing which I've been really helped by the storytelling is to discover in the Bible, there is a lot of stories in the Bible. Almost the half of the Bible is the storytelling. So I've discovered a lot of stories which could be used by, life-changing to the people whom we are reaching to, especially to unreached people group. Like here, our target is to reach the young Muslim communities. So with the stories, I think it works a lot. So I've discovered that.
Wonderful.
Sure.
So maybe can you share, do you have any good stories that would show how storytelling has helped with multiplication in your work?
One of the story which I could share for now is very popular, a popular story in the Bible. The story of Luke, is it Luke chapter 10, where the story we hear about the story of Martha and the Martha, is it Mary and Martha?
Yes.
Yes. Where one of them, they decided to listen, to be at the feet of Jesus, to listen the gospel where Jesus was sharing. And when one of them, they were busy showing hospitality on doing the cooking and other stuffs. Like that story, it has been bring a lot of transformation for the choice we have always, the choice we have in life, to impact our lives as well, to make our lives to be changed. Yeah, and at the end, Jesus was simply, explained to them to say, I think Martha has been chosen a thing that will never move away from our life. So we learn also to make a choice, a good choice in our lives that could impact the whole life up to the eternity, something like that. So that brings a lot of life transformation and also community transformation through our choices. So this is one of the stories.
Sure. One of the things that we're highlighting is how orality can be very powerful when combined with sport. What is something you have found that would encourage people in that they should think about using sport and orality together?
Sometimes I also have some sports Bible clubs.
Mm.
Sports. Yes, I
Yeah.
also do the sports thing. And most of people whom we are dealing with, they are young people, the youths, you see, and some of them they don't understand. They are not, they are all people.
Mm.
They don't know how to read or write, you see. So sometimes we just go there with no Bible, but you have just memorized yourself the Bible and the story in the Bible.
Mm.
So you just call the team, like in the sport, I think you can reach many people with the storytelling.
Mm.
I've discovered that. Yesterday, I went to one of the Bible club, which we use sports, and I came up with a story as well there in the Bible. You see, so the storytelling with the sports, I think it could work because at the football pitch, we cannot use the Bible, the reading Bible, but the story, you can reach even to many who are not even Christians.
Mm.
But just only the story, you can reach to many, and we have seen that, and there is a lot of impact. Even I've got a colleague which we trained people here, and he's in charge of sports.
Mm.
You see, and by the name of Chris Zuze, he's in charge of the sports, and he has got a lot of Bible studies. He's using storytelling, so we can use the storytelling with the sports. I think could work, and it's a powerful tool to reach out, especially the sports. So yeah, so could make impact with that. Sure.
Okay.
Cool. Well, Roman, why don't you go ahead and just introduce yourself and where you're at, who you work for, and what you guys do, and yeah.
Yeah. My name is Roman Kripanoff. I live in Houston, Texas, and I work for a nonprofit organization called Revival Sport. And our mission and vision is to use sport, play, and fitness to plant sustainable disciple-making movements among the international groups that live in our city and in North America. So that's what I do. We're trying to use sport, play, and fitness as a platform on which we can build relationships, but also begin discipling people that come and join us in these various activities.
Awesome. So let me ask you, how did you get involved in within what you're doing?
Yeah, it's a good question. I got involved in it because out of nowhere, God just gave vision and mission for my brother and I together to begin making disciples specifically among refugees. So my brother and I, our whole family moved here as refugees from Uzbekistan 12 years ago. My family were in ministry there, and the government decided to kick us out. And when we moved to Houston, I had no desire of being in ministry or make disciples because all I saw was persecution and poverty living in Uzbekistan. And I thought, okay, here I can chase the American dream and become rich, and I'll support a bunch of missionaries, but I'm not going to do any missions work. But in high school, God really called both my brother and I to do this full time, led us to a group of refugees. And we didn't want to do it full time. We wanted to do it like twice a week that we served these refugees. But soon there were too many of them. And we had to do it all 5 days and then 7 days a week. And so we quit our jobs straight out of high schools. And since then have really dedicated our time and lives serving people, immigrants and refugees here.
That's awesome. Well, how has Orality helped you?
Yeah. That's a great question. I think for us, I was not really, for me, I love reading books. I love printed word. I love to write. And so I thought that everybody else loves that as well. So when we began working with refugees and discipling them through Discovery Bible Study. A lot of it, let's read and let's write. Let's read and let's write. We thought that's the best way to move forward. Our first encounter and the first obstacle was, well, nobody's reading and writing in English because they're not from here. And for us to, we have to wait for 3-4 years before we can begin discipling them. And if they're way older, because some of the people we get connected to are in their 60s, we will never be able to disciple them using just reading and writing. So that was our first obstacle. Second obstacle, we said, okay, so we might not be able to read English. They might not be able to read in English or write in English. Well, let's get them all Bibles in their own languages. And so we spent 6 months. Some of these languages are so rare because they're tribal languages. It took us forever to find Bibles in their own languages. We got the Bibles. We were all so happy. We thought this is going to be breakthrough in ministry for us. We passed out the Bibles to them and they tell us, well, we don't even speak or write. We don't even read or write in our own language. And for us, we're like, okay, what are we going to do now? They don't even read and write in their own language. And that's when we got connected to Matt and others who began sharing with us, well, how can we use orality? So our first step was, okay, converting all the Bible passages that we go to through, which we first start from creation to Christ, into a story. So we began sharing stories with people. And what we saw as we began to share stories is that it's a lot easier for people to replicate them and share them with others. When we read the Bible, people always felt like they had to carry their Bible or they had to find somebody else who has the Bible on them to share that story. They would constantly forget where the story was located in the Bible, what verse, what passage. But once we began sharing stories and they began to memorize stories, we saw people actually sharing it with their neighbors, with their parents. We saw guys in our soccer club who come from Buddhist backgrounds really get the stories because we kept repeating and repeating, and they practiced with us telling the stories, and they've reached their whole families, their moms and dads, and share the gospel with them, and their whole families are now following Jesus. Our second step was, okay, what else can we add to this process? Is this working well? And how can we combine it with teaching people English? Because we saw that would be a great way to connect to the whole family, not just to soccer players, but how can we connect the whole family? And we said, okay, teaching English, but we have to teach it using majority oral tools. And so the same thing, we said, okay, let's do it scripture-based only. We're going to use the same 20 Bible passages that we use for the first discovery process. But now let's add a coloring element. So we developed what we call 20 coloring books that people, as they listen to us tell the story, or as they listen to the story on their device, they begin coloring it and they see the picture. So now them listening to it is connecting with the vision, with the eyesight. And people begin memorizing these stories even quicker, seeing things in a brand new way. And we would have just a few English words on the paper to help them learn a little bit of English. But so we developed these 20 stories, and we, for the first time, it was one of the first. So they were first targeted to two groups, really. It was older refugee women that we developed this for. They wanted to learn English. They wanted to study the Bible. And the first time, one of them was 73 years old. She walked to the first class, and it was the first time she held a pencil in her hands, a coloring pencil to color her picture. And she's 70, and you think in our heads, it's like, oh, everybody knows how to hold a pencil. And it was the first time. Second thing she said, she's never memorized anything she's ever learned. Like, she's never retold anybody anything. She has short memory, term memory loss. She forgets everything quickly. And on the third lesson, she said, it's the first time that I was able to retold something to somebody else. Connecting the story with the pictures helped her solidify all of it in her mind. And so she began sharing it with her neighbors, with her friends. And for us now on the soccer field, we used to print out passages of the Bible, or we used to use the Bible app on our phones. We no longer do that. We share stories. What helped us again, to reinforce the stories in people's minds, because that was their obstacle. A lot of times we would do a story with a teenager, but teenagers have just flow of information coming at them nonstop. And they would forget the stories in like 12 hours because they've just saw or heard 30 more stories throughout the day on their social media. And so we said, okay, how about we combine then a whole soccer practice? So we'll do a soccer skill that will be connected to a story, that will be connected to a life value, and see if they can memorize that better. So we would, for example, talk about heading the ball and how do we head the ball. And we would teach the skill to people, but then we would connect it to the life value of being courageous. Every time you go to hit the ball, you get elbowed in the face, or the ball is coming hitting you too hard. Every time it's a courageous act. It's never just an easy act to do on the field. Well, who's courageous in the Bible? Well, David and Goliath. And that is the story that we connect. And so when kids begin to connect all these pieces throughout soccer, again, stories begin to just be solidified in their mind. Before that, we would share a story at the end of practice that has no connection to the practice. Most of them didn't even listen to the story. They would walk out. But now we started bringing up the story throughout all elements of the practice. So even when we talk about creation, we can connect it to being creative on the soccer field. What does it look like for me to be creative in different situations? Like God is extremely creative. Or the same story of creation can teach us the story of teamwork, right? Even from the very beginning, let us make man in the image.
Yes.
And so that's been extremely helpful in our ministry here. Again, we started thinking, hey, these people moved into the Western context, so we need to use Western tools to disciple them. Because we moved into the Western context and the tools that were used for us here were Western tools. So we thought, okay, we need to use that same approach for everybody else. But now Orality is playing a huge part in our Discovery Bible studies. We no longer write. We retell stories. We share stories with each other. We try to find key themes in the stories together. And none of that writing is not required. Reading is not required for that. And so it's been an incredible journey for us.
And I love the progression there of like thinking you had to do it the Western way, but then all the little discoveries that you made along the way, going from just sharing stories to trying to integrate the stories practically into the practices, and seeing how, man, just the things you've discovered along the way. That's really awesome. One last question, and I think we probably are over time, but what would you, if you had to give any advice to anyone that's kind of just starting off, what advice would you give them, especially working here in the US, where maybe there's a little bit of a stigma around orality and oral strategies? What advice would you give them?
Yeah, I think if you're just starting and sharing stories and sharing using oral techniques, start with your friends and family. I think that will give you a huge encouragement on this journey, because you will see how stories are impacting them, and that through storytelling, their lives are being changed. Second thing is practice retelling stories a lot on your own. That was a hard part for me, because it's a lot easier to just open up and read than it is to read once and then try to retell and remembering all the key elements of the story. So at the beginning, I had to sit by myself. I'll read maybe a story 10 times, and then I'll close my Bible, and then I sit there and I retell on my own. Then I'll find my wife and I'll tell the story to her, practice and practice. Then I'll find somebody else and I'll practice. So it takes a lot of practice. Don't think, it's enough to just read the story and be done with it. I can retell it. And a lot of times I think as Christians, we think we know these Bible stories so well that I don't even need to go and read it again or listen to it again. I can just go and retell. But once we begin to do that, we actually begin to leave out some important details of the story, some important character development in the story, some important Bible verses from the story. And so I would suggest just practice, practice, practice. And I guess last thing is in your storytelling, memorize some of the key Bible passages and incorporate them into your story. Again, I think that played a huge role in what we are seeing here in Houston as people begin to actually memorize scriptures without even knowing that these are printed words, because we included them in the story, and that was helpful as well.
Awesome. Well, hey, I really appreciate you taking the time. I think what you shared is going to be hugely beneficial to people, especially seeing. I love the connection you made between, hey, we're not just going to teach them sport, we're going to teach them the stories through the sport, and how both kind of played off each other. They learned the sport better, but they also learned the stories better when it was connected. And the idea of connecting the images in the story too, like that's really cool. Well, hey, thank you for the time.